the best thing you can do at the beginning of the school year is go figure out who these kids are and figure out what their needs are, and talk to their educators and talk to their family members that come and pick them up or that you encounter, and learn more about the individual, because a lot of the times you'll discover that even the parents have not figured out some of the behaviors and some of the mechanisms behind them.
Welcome back to Finding Common Ground. I'm flying solo today again. I wanted to give you a couple updates. We have our website up and going now. It's called fcgadvocacy.org. If you go to it, you're going to see a lot of updates. You're going to see some inspiring stories. You're going to see some bios about Heather and myself, and some upcoming events that we plan on coming, and a whole bunch of other information to help those that are out there in the world that we all live. So thank you for listening. And again, if you need more information, we have our podcast here. We also have merchandise. We have a whole bunch of projects coming down the road. I wanted to mention one thing on Saturday, the 18th. Check Spectrum News. Even if this airs after that, take a look at that at Spectrum News Ability Bus. There's a cool initiative coming out where we hope to provide buses for the disabled, autism, Down syndrome kids at no charge in your community in most all of the states, and starting with New York. So it's quite an initiative. Spectrum did a story on it, and Paradigm Films is following up on that shortly and releasing a documentary on that. So there'll be more information on that. I'm just glad to be involved in it, and it's going to help all of you. Again, our whole purpose of this podcast is to inspire you and to empower you. And we're always here for you. If you have any questions, please reach out, and we'll do everything we can to help you in crisis. And we'll do everything we can to help you going forward with our podcast. And now it's time to bring in our special guest, Matt Yelton. He's an EMT professional, and he's also works in the IDD field. He has a lot of passion for this. And more importantly, he's the father of an autistic son. Matt, yeah. I think I met you. I'm trying to think back at Better Together, one of the events that we had way back. You always are participating in a lot of the autism events that we put on with Better Together and some of the other community things that we do. And you've always been great about participating in that and being there. So I wanted you to tell your story, because you're coming at that not just as a professional, but also as an autistic dad.
Yeah. So kind of the brief overview of the story for me is I've been an EMS professional for the last 15 years now. I'm going into my 16th year this spring. So I've been a paramedic professionally in the Mohawk Valley, working between Utica and Rome on the ambulances there, and then worked my way up through to becoming a flight paramedic locally here at the Griffiths Airport here in Rome. Along the way, met my wife. Her and I have 3 children now, but our youngest, Garrett, was born in June of 2016. He was born a reasonably healthy child. He was 9 pounds, some 8 ounces, like 22 inches long, perfectly healthy baby boy. We were released from the hospital within a day and home, going through, your typical new baby challenges. My wife being a new 911 dispatcher, me being fresh into working in the helicopter EMS world, doing my training out of Canandaigua, just outside of Rochester. So we both had pretty difficult jobs, and my commute was almost 2 hours one way, and her shifting was overnight, and her week was like a Tuesday to Saturday type of orientation. So didn't leave a whole lot of spare time for her and I, but and raising a baby boy and 2 little girls that were, a few years apart, but reasonably self-sufficient. So as we kind of went through those challenges with Garrett in the beginning, your routine stuff, teething and feeding challenges and colicky behaviors, and really struggled with bottles and really struggled with formulas. And, we really struggled with a lot of those pretty routine things and very early on. So you go back to the pediatrician and run into one of those situations where, they tell you you're doing all the right things. You're changing the formula, you're changing the bottles, all this stuff. But the long and short of it is we ran into some significant developmental delays and ended up having to advocate pretty aggressively as type A personality parents, myself having a pretty significant healthcare background and my wife having some healthcare background, but being a very type A person and I'm one dispatcher with military background, we really kind of hard charged these challenges. And fast forward, a few years into Garrett's life, we did end up with an official diagnosis that he was on the spectrum and ASD. So with that came a lot more challenges, of course, when we were entering the school age years, et cetera. But we've been, beside him through a lot of the challenges and struggles advocating for him along the way. But my own story kind of took a turn, after his official diagnosis with the EMS community at large. We started to get a lot of questions from my colleagues about challenges that they were facing with these types of individuals in the field. And then I realized under my own kind of research and my own passion to educate other EMS providers that the education system that supports us missed this entire population, this whole entire at-risk population. Yes, there is a chapter that is encompassing that special needs and considerations population in total, but that encompasses geriatrics, pediatrics, and everybody in between. So the intellectual and developmental disability community, the geriatric patients with the degenerative diseases, and then the pediatric patients with the other special needs. That it just really did not pay enough attention to the at-risk population. And working professionally, especially in the Mohawk Valley, there are a lot of state housing facilities and other types of living environments for these individuals, education environments, schools, et cetera, where we would encounter these individuals on a pretty regular basis in crisis or experiencing some type of an emergency. And we were ill prepared at best. So I kind of made it my mission at that point to develop some educational material to help prepare first responders. And it went from truly the honest original intent of this educational opportunity was for EMS professionals that were looking for continued education, go to a conference and I'd be one of the speakers type of environment to I've sat and taught, law enforcement professionals that were getting ready for their school resource officer jobs at the local schools, to bus garage employees, to 911 dispatchers, to general community members at the Christian Community Center up in Turin. It's just exploded in popularity. And it really does kind of cover all the nuances and challenges associated with these individuals that are experiencing a crisis or a medical emergency. So kind of a very long story over a large period of time. Short, I identified that our educational system for EMS professionals specifically really underserved that population. And it happens to be probably one of the largest that we encounter on a more frequent basis than not. So our education was really focused on those trauma calls, those cardiac emergencies, those respiratory emergencies in the adult patients. And the reality is we encounter the special needs and intellectual and developmental disability community much more often than we do the penetrating trauma patient on the side of the road.
Yeah, Mike, that's all encompassing. I so appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you were involved in training some of the school resource officers, because
Yep.
having done foster care and getting all those phone calls from the different schools in the area, that even from a school resource officer, that one of our kids is behavioral, but he's also autistic.
Yeah.
And to know that those school resource officers have some kind of a background and training in autism and in the IDD world, I think is so beneficial, not just to the resource officers, but also the child that's has to deal with the resource officer, so that he knows that he feels comfortable enough that this person can handle the situation, which might not be so much behavioral, but more on the autism part of it causing it.
Yeah. So, and that started as I went to the Cazenovia Police Academy, the former Cazenovia College, and sat with their cadets as part of a parent advocate / first responder to talk to them about how to respond to individuals that may be on the spectrum in crisis. Those nonverbal, or at least mostly nonverbal individuals that are going to be exhibiting bizarre or peculiar behavior, to help kind of reduce the potential risk for them escalating a situation they could potentially de-escalate if armed with the appropriate information, right? So it started as an innocent opportunity for both them to learn and me to probe and figure out what they were learning, right, from the college itself and their own personal experiences. And then it led to Little Falls police chief reaching out to me and saying that they had this new SRO education program that they were doing at Herkimer County Community College, and that he wanted me to come speak as both a parent and a first responder. And I did my presentation in a pseudo form. I made some adjustments so it fit the group of people that I was talking to, and it was overwhelming, the response that I got from those. A lot of those guys and gals were retired police officers, retired corrections officers, et cetera, with law enforcement background, and but their education was decades old, right? So they started to tell me stories about these kids that they were encountering early on, the pre-K and kindergarten and first graders, that they were originally being called for because they were having behavioral issues with them or whatever the case was. And to your credit, to Oda, what you were saying, that a lot of the times I was providing clarity to the fact that it wasn't necessarily a behavioral situation, like a psychological disorder or problem. It owed to something bigger, something else was happening, or there was a misunderstanding or misinterpretation of the behavior altogether. So it really opened up kind of Pandora's box as far as open, constructive conversation, because then I could provide feedback and that awareness and education to help at least give them the tools necessary to figure out what their particular students were going to need. And that's one of the things I charged them with as I was walking out, was the best thing you can do at the beginning of the school year is go figure out who these kids are and figure out what their needs are, and talk to their educators and talk to their family members that come and pick them up or that you encounter, and learn more about the individual, because a lot of the times you'll discover that even the parents have not figured out some of the behaviors and some of the mechanisms behind them. So it's one of those, like, everybody's learning, especially early on. But that's how we learned, was, and unfortunately, as Garrett was running around the gymnasium at his school for pre-K, and the teachers and the principal and everybody that, rest assured, told us that they were the experts and they could take care of things. And here we are on the phone 15 minutes into his very first day because they lost control of him already.
Right.
So, yeah.
And Matt, I see that all the time. It's interesting. I'm involved with quite a few agencies, and they get a lot of their new staff with turnover coming right out of college, and they might have a master's degree, but they can't handle some of the kids that we've had in our house for a half hour. And so it tells me they probably more training is needed by people like yourself, and especially people that have skin in the game, so to speak, because you have an autistic child. And there's nobody better to teach this stuff as far as I'm concerned. And if you had a master's degree after you, I would still take the fact that you're an autism parent first as the educational expert on it with anything to do with autism. I just think that when you live it, it's just a better scenario about how to go about trying to find solutions to these things, to the problems. And that autism is a spectrum. We have had so many kids come through our house. They're all different. So I'm constantly learning myself. And I've been doing this a long time. So kudos to you for reaching out and teaching others this kind of stuff for what you do. I had one quick question. I know you flying on helicopters. Have you had any children within the autism and IDD population that have had to fly on those besides like an ambulance?
Yeah. Yep. My crew just the other day went up to Watertown to pick one up, actually. And these guys are all, we're a very close group of individuals that work here. So a lot of these people spend a lot of time with me outside of work as well, and have some exposure to Garrett. And they're immensely professional individuals that this particular group of clinical providers is very motivated to learn and do their best. So leaning forward, they're well educated and understand the needs of this community, especially. But they actually flew a young man from Watertown down to upstate for some higher acuity care needs. And when they came back and they just raved about how great the interaction was, and how the individual was absolutely just in love with flying in a helicopter. So it was a good kind of heartwarming experience. And I myself flew a young man that was has Down syndrome, down to a hospital in Pennsylvania that we were able to connect and communicate and kind of work through some of his personal challenges because not unlike our friends on the autism spectrum, our Down syndrome individuals have some of the very same challenges. So,
Exactly.
and it was one of those. It's easy once you understand things to bridge that across to a much larger community to help use those tools to help encounter and make these encounters much easier for those individuals.
Yeah, look, anytime when you get in those situations where they have to call you,
Yeah.
in your situation, I would imagine it's pretty traumatic. And then to have somebody in the IDD community, I can't imagine the parents how distraught sometimes they can be.
Oh yeah.
Also, and in the whole situation. So, I mean, if you had any specific instances with the parents, were had a positive or negative reaction, maybe with you guys.
I'll say, I was going to say, we have a ground ambulance component that we work alongside of that had a less than ideal interaction with a young man who was in crisis and had just things did not go well between the paramedic and the individual. To my surprise, the parent was far more understanding and forgiving of the situation than you would anticipate the average parent to be, right? Like it, I was frustrated with the situation and sat down and re-educated the clinical provider as their leader, and did kind of say that I had to put my father hat aside because that person feels drastically different about the situation, right? So it was actually a negative encounter on our side, but a very positive encounter with the guardian of the individual because she was far more understanding and appreciative of the forward, lean of us being apologetic and explaining that there was corrective action and an educational opportunity identified for the very old school paramedic. But
I
it
would
was
call
one of
that
those like
a win-win, Matt.
it was, yeah,
Yeah.
it was one of those opportunities for me to deploy information for a provider to avoid it ever getting worse, hopefully, and it ever reoccurring. But a positive interaction with a family member who at least could rest assured that someone was advocating for her son in her absence, right?
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that. You're very upfront about the fact that sometimes we do run across the negative situation,
Yeah,
because it makes it, even telling it. And I'm glad you're being forthright with that because even telling that it's so real and genuine. It's our life. It's how we live. We've had negative situations in my own home, and I'm pretty experienced.
yeah,
But we've had far more positive ones, and every time we have a negative situation, it might be a new kid coming into our house with autism, we find a way to turn it into a positive. And when you're educating, in what you do and teaching your paramedics and the parents, and they see how this all goes down, and I just think like I said, it's a win-win for everybody.
yeah. That's exactly the icebreaker I use when I'm doing my learning the language of our biggest fans lecture for EMS professionals. I use a very real scenario that I had. It was a patient encounter of my own from a little over a decade ago where things did not go the best track. They went the appropriate track for the time period because I was not educated to approach the situation a different way. And we ended up using chemical restraints for the individual that was in crisis. And again, it doesn't mean that that isn't going to be the end result, right? Sometimes they're too far in that direction where it truly does become they need to be chemically sedated. We need to
Right.
kind of reset and start over. But I could have deployed several things between me getting to that point to attempt to de-escalate and redirect the situation, right? So I utilize my own learning opportunity, my own experience as that kind of icebreaker to say, look, I've made some of the very same mistakes. I'm teaching you today to try to avoid, right? And that genuinely kind of brings us to the same level and gets them to open up and understand that I too have identified pitfalls and shortcomings of my own practice as a pre-hospital provider. And now as a father and an educator and an advocate, I'm here with my own experience where things could have been better, some opportunities for learning for all of you, and a lot of tools to put in your toolbox to try to approach these situations in a far more constructive, professional, and appropriate way, right? That's kind of the goal.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. And again, we're always learning. I know you're at the Pathways to Success
Yep.
outing that we had, and you presented some on that, a little bit on that. What you thought about that event?
I think it's an absolutely great opportunity, and hopefully becomes much more a much bigger version of itself someday, and draws the attendance and crowd that it deserves. As a parent and an advocate, I really wish that I had that opportunity when Garrett was freshly kind of experiencing some of these things, because we genuinely had to learn many of those lessons by being those kind of hard charger advocate type A parents. And not everyone's like that. And I know that we're, working in the fields that my wife and I work in, that our fields of work command that type of personality, but not everyone's like that. And there are parents that truly do get confused and the waters are too murky and it's hard to navigate a lot of those challenges. And it one challenge is changed out for another and another and another as they grow and get older. It's just another challenge that comes up. So that event literally gave everyone the opportunity to start from the beginning and work all the way through the life cycle of a person, lifespan development, and gave you inroads to some of the challenges you're going to encounter along the way, and at least gave people the kind of highlights of understanding of the opportunities that are out there, and the people, the connections, the networking opportunity alone was just invaluable. I mean, you couldn't measure the value of that. It's just not every day that you have a room full of all of the experts for everything. So
Right.
I definitely hope that continues to grow.
Yeah, they actually they added me to their committee. I went to the
Which is
first one
great. Yeah.
yesterday, and I hope to help with that because on the family end of it, because I talk to so many families, and I don't get too worried about the first one. Even when they did the Boilermaker race, when it first started, the attendance was low, and then
Yeah.
it built up. It's the same analogy because so many families that are in this autism and IDD world, Matt, that are struggling just to exist. They're a single mom. Both parents are working. They're trying to deal with two kids with multiple disabilities, and all of what that involves. And I've talked to some of those parents, and they just couldn't get there. And so, I'm hoping they do some virtual things, make it virtual next year,
Yeah.
and grow the audience. Because for those ones that can't make it, because they're
Yeah.
certainly interested. And I know a couple of people, Scott, our producer on this show, came in, and Alexandra came in from Poughkeepsie. She said that they don't have anything like what happened there. And even yourself, they don't have anybody teaching what they have, what is needed. She thinks is needed in the in the EMS world. I don't know if you guys are down that way yet, or if you talked to people down there, but um,
Yeah.
as a parent, she's saying that she's not getting a lot of these kinds of events ever. So I'm glad that they're doing the event. I'm also glad that what you need is certainly, or what you provide certainly is needed out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I've done these educational sessions virtually for up all the professionals up in Maine, Vermont. I've done it virtually for the entire state of New York when it comes down to it for the EMS community. I've gone to several conferences and provided different variations of this, and especially now that the data is starting to be updated again, I anticipate over the winter I'll make a bunch of adjustments to the material and hit the road again with the updated data points and a few more resources and opportunities and educational components for the next kind of iteration, because that's kind of the glorious thing about these types of events and that type of educational materials. It does not stay the same, and every time that you do it, you learn from the experience and you can add and change and alter the experience for the next user, right? So that's kind of I love the idea of finding a way to make that opportunity that we had, a few weekends ago, be accessible via virtual platform, via live stream, via some other adjunct or component, because you're absolutely right. I had plenty of people that I'd spread that to via email and social media, et cetera. And lives are challenging right now. 2025, a small household and family, everybody's working multiple jobs, and it's just not easy. And I can see where, dedicating even just a few hours on a Saturday sometimes may not be possible to go somewhere, but maybe more reasonable or feasible if everybody has a mobile device or some type of laptop or something that they could, even listen into it in that kind of podcast type format. You can't replace the face-to-face interaction and networking. You can't replace the ability to interface and ask the questions directly, but at the very least, as other people are asking the questions, you can paint a really decent roadmap or picture in the direction that you want to go in.
Yeah, that's kind of what I pitched to him yesterday. I was hoping I can get
Right.
Scott from Rockbox to come in and we'll do something differently and provide that virtual things. Maybe a
Right.
single mom can only pop in for a couple hours and hear your topic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that works. And if that helps her, we just help somebody and move the needle. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
hopefully we can figure all that out and find a way to do that next year and all that. And do you have plans for expansion with your EMS helicopter, all that kind of stuff? Because I think it's so necessary, and you don't hear a lot about it anymore. At the times I've heard about it, some of the local ambulances closing and finding a hard time making it out there. And you guys okay? I mean, you.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's a struggle.
It is definitely a struggle. The system is in desperate need of a lot of reform and change. You know how it goes in the healthcare insurance world. The reimbursement rates are never matching or meeting the costs of operation. Thankfully, we're a nonprofit organization, so a lot of our cost of operation and expansion and capital purchases are covered in large by our philanthropic side of the house, our business development side of the office. So there's always the cost of service and there's always the revenue recovery and all that stuff. But thankfully, we also have that kind of added component and added advantage to maintain the operation. 3 bases across New York. It's a large footprint. And in the world of helicopter EMS, that's a reasonably large organization. We're happy with the size we are now, but we're definitely diversifying and starting to expand in some of that ground transport world, because the ambulance services that do provide a lot of those, local area movements are struggling. And there's going to be a lot of change coming, and it's a lot of shift towards government subsidy and county-based services and, town-supported, village-supported services and things like that. So we're definitely diversifying our platform a little bit and helping the other local nonprofit ground ambulance company survive some of these trying times. And hopefully we'll come out of this a much larger organization with a lot more diverse capability as we kind of roll through some of these challenges.
Yeah, look, it's so needed, Matt, and especially those that are trained and experienced with the autism community, the ones in special needs and ones in Down syndrome. Though I would imagine you would shine in that, and it would make parents comfortable knowing that you guys were in charge of their kids during the transports.
Yeah,
because it's not easy. A lot of times we fret over, what's going to happen, with our child. Oh, there's some, we have to sometimes go from, drive from behind. That I've had to with foster kids and not knowing what's going to happen. So I'd like to know that you guys are there and making an impact in the education piece of bringing light to, what is needed in our disability world. So that part's really appreciated. I had another, I wanted to go back to your son, Garrett. How are you with services and supports there? Are you comfortable with it, with the supports and services that he's getting right now?
Yes. Thankfully, our school system has really kind of stepped up to the plate as far as supporting his needs. In the very beginning, it was challenging, but our school system was spread out across a lot larger area with a lot more satellite buildings and things like that. And now that we're encompassed on one campus and everything, all the resources are consolidated into one location and supported also by the BOCES system. We've found that our school system is actually the home to support other school systems that don't have the ability to support the needs of these individuals. So especially with Garrett, we're very fortunate to have the access to resource and support system that is provided by the school, and then our primary care office that's, linked in with the school system. So uniquely,
good to know.
Yeah.
Absolutely good to know that, and comforting to other parents as they hear this.
Yes.
I wanted to, we'll be ending soon. I wanted to quick. We're going to be doing dad advocating type situations, because so many times, Matt, the dads aren't involved Dads are out working. Dads might be in, especially in the foster care system, are not there, not present.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, the autism world goes on and the disability world goes on. The moms are carrying the load a lot of times. And I'm involved in so many different things. And my wife says, there's 200 women in the room and you're the only guy.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that you're involved. I'm glad that you're out front and center of this stuff. We're hoping to do shows on Thursdays going forward. You happen to be the first one, Dad, Autism Dad, that we've had on. So I appreciate that. Going forward, we plan on having a bunch more and try and inspire them to step up and try and inspire them to do what you're doing, taking a step forward, so to speak, in helping the moms and their wives and or partners or whatever, and going forward with the challenges that we all face.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe it or not, I am not the only one that is a helicopter EMS paramedic, father of a child with autism, who's doing this very same work. A colleague of mine over at Lifelink in the Midwest, he and I did a podcast together with EMS organization, Learning Management System Company, that we, during Autism Awareness Month specifically, talking about parent advocacy and expanding the education system and knowledge and understanding and acceptance for the individuals in our community, specifically for EMS professionals in both the helicopter transport and ground transport world. So there's at least one other gentleman like myself in this particular professional community that is doing it. And we're working, we communicate often because I agree with you 100%. We are definitely the minority when it comes down to it. The fathers out advocating and doing this work, we could definitely use a lot more, I think, and inspire a lot more people to do so.
Yeah, you might have just inspired some on the podcast to get more involved, Matt. So thanks. Any other closing comments you want to make, or?
No, I appreciate the opportunity. This is great. I love spreading the message and explaining some of the backstory behind how I ended up where I am, and especially kind of carrying the flag for Garrett, because that's kind of why I coined that title of learning the language of our biggest fans, because he's definitely, probably, as cliche as it sounds, he is my hero, because he's overcome so much already, and he's 9. If from a little boy that was not potty trained up until about 2 years ago, because that was a very unique challenge of ours, and was nonverbal up until 6, who speaks fluently full sentences now, and has learned a very creative language. So it just drives my passion even more to help other parents understand and help other professionals in my world understand and be comfortable with interacting with these individuals, especially when they need them the most, and especially when they're in crisis or experiencing some type of emergency.
Perfect. That's great. That's inspiring. And maybe someday Garrett's going to be the one taking the bullhorn, so to speak, and doing the advocacy for somebody else. So
I certainly
you might
hope
have inspired your son to do it. I'm trying to do the same thing with my son, who's very bashful, and he's 35. So good luck with all of that. Good luck with what you do. Thank you for coming on, Matt. We appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Continue the conversation by joining our Facebook group. If you're a fan of the show, please join our supporters club. Subscribe on YouTube, rate and review on your favorite listening app, but most of all, share it with your friends. Just one more click or comment can make a huge difference and help us to continue finding common ground.